Welcome to another episode. I am here today with two phenomenal women who are no strangers to CHAP. Ginger is the voice of CHAP and has been for over 230 plus episodes, and was also a speaker at the last CHAP convention. And Gretchen has shared so much wisdom with us at CHAP. She's a powerhouse, and in short, you are in for a special treat. So, even though they're no strangers, I do want to give them just an opportunity to introduce themselves, if there are any new listeners, and just kind of tell us how their journey started, how it's going, and where they are. So, Ginger, let's start with you.
Okay, so y'all, if you don't know me, I'm Ginger. I'm married to Steve. I'm the host of Chat with Chap, which, as she said, I've been doing for 5 years now. And we have been homeschooling. I think this is my 17th year. We've got 6 kids. So I've graduated 2. And yeah, it's definitely been a major journey of change and release. We'll get into it a little bit later, but we got into homeschooling. It was kind of like one of those crazy one package. Like you go to the natural childbirth lady and she homeschools and does organics and does this and does that. So she like did all the things. So that's kind of where we learned about it. And then my mom was a beautician, so she knew people who homeschooled. So she would tell me because it was kind of new in our area. And then all the things. Steve worked with a homeschool student at the college, which was novel. So we talked to him and kind of gathered some information and discussed things. And I had a best friend who she and I would discuss it and what are we going to do and all those kind of things. So yeah, God led us to this path, and man, he just totally stuck that passion right in here. And it's really a passion of discipleship for our children. It's the education is part of it, but it's just when our children close and want to disciple them and stuff like that. So yeah, we've been doing it for 17 years, and there's definitely changes that happen to everybody and through the process and everything over the years. But like I said, we'll get into that in a few minutes. So
Absolutely. Well, I'm Gretchen Rowe. I've been married for 42 years to Pat. Perhaps both of us are wickedly stubborn, so neither one of us will give up on our relationship. So we have 6 children, and we graduated the last one last June. We homeschooled 21 years. And I had and unlike Ginger, this was not a calling for me. In fact, I was in the corner with both fingers in my ears saying, no, 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 I can't hear you. But God clearly had other plans. And so I love to say that we homeschooled 1 year at a time for 21 years. And I wouldn't have traded that journey for anything. I am the community relations coordinator for Demi Learning, and I am the host of the Demi Learning Show. And this begins my 4th year as hosting that show. And I'm really looking forward to coming up to the winter conference. I'm really excited to give these 2 ladies a hug and spend a little bit of time there. And I think it's going to be terrific.
I love that. Thank you so much. It's funny when you talked about your homeschool journey because my husband was the first one to start talking about homeschooling. And we were both working in New York City, living in New Jersey. And for us, what that meant is our kids would be home, someone would come in and homeschool them, and we'd just continue working. Cue the pandemic, being able to try it on, and then me quitting my job in 2021. I was like, okay, I'm going to build my business. And, my kids are in private Christian school by this point because when we moved, I'm like, we can't afford to send them to that public school. It's free, but we can't afford to do that. And I just really remember, like, there's sometimes when God talks to me, and I'm like, I think he's saying, in this moment, I was so clear that I was supposed to homeschool my kids. And I told my husband, he was like, okay, then let's do it. So I was also the one who was kind of like, don't you remember I said I'm going to build my business? What are we doing here? This is not the plan, but I'm doing it. And one of the things I appreciate about home-centered education is having trailblazers and pioneers and veterans like the 2 of you, because when you're in it for the first time, it just seems so overwhelming, so big. So why am I doing this? What am I doing? But then when I look at 2 of you, it's kind of like that Titus 2 woman that the Bible talks about, where you teach us to love our kids and you teach us to love our husbands and you show us what you've gone through and just really help to keep us directed and centered in Christ and the reason that we're doing it. So I recognize that there's not one size that fits all, but I really just wanted to have you share some of your gems that you've learned, maybe right in the beginning, something that you've learned, or, as you continued, what was it like being in the trenches? And then what was the turning point for you to really simplify your routine if you ever got to that? So Gretchen, let's start with you.
Well, I think the hardest thing, and I think Ro, you and I talked about this when we talked a month and a half ago. Often there are people who speak into our lives outside of our nuclear family who question our choices. And in my particular situation, I was going to prove all those people wrong. And so we did a lot of academics, and I can tell you my kids were phenomenally well educated. But I can also tell you in retrospect that if I had stuck to the basics, which is reading, compositional writing, mathematics, and spelling, my kids would have been equally well educated, and we would have enjoyed our homeschool journey maybe a little bit more. Now, I used a very classical curriculum for 17 years. I don't regret that, but as I grew, I began to realize that I didn't have to do all the things to have kids who were well educated. And I think the most important lesson that I learned in all of that was to read my children. Not all 6 of my kids were homeschooled all the way through high school. My 5th child said after his freshman year of high school, I want to go to public school. And my husband and I made the commitment at the very beginning that we would do for each child what was best for them. And that was the best path forward for him. He's 24 years old now. He's an amazing adult. And it was the best path forward. And his younger brother was homeschooled from middle school, was homeschooled to middle school, and then went to middle school and high school. And that was the best path for them. My 4 oldest kids would tell you that they can't imagine doing anything other than being homeschooled. But I think it's really important that we keep our accounts really short and we read our children, because our children are going to tell us what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I'm trying to think where I started, like for me, I needed to have a plan. Like you mentioned, the overwhelm. Okay, so Steve and I are planners. So we decided we were going to homeschool. Well, we attended our first CHAP convention when our oldest was 3. Okay.
Okay, so
So,
we in that are polar opposites.
okay, yeah.
Nope, that's not me.
Yeah. So we just want to know, like, we want to know what's out there and be prepared. Like, we like being prepared. So, you walk into, if you've been to any convention, you walk into the CHAP convention, at least back at that time, especially, it was like, oh my word. So we had 2 years to kind of wrap our brain around this, but even then I was so overwhelmed. There are so many options out there, which is something that can really overwhelm you. But it's okay to just pick something. Just pick something and get started. So for me, I needed something that was planned, scheduled, ready to go. And I was check off the boxes, like Gretchen, get it all done. So, right? It's get all the things. We didn't do classical, but we did do a lot. I'm eclectic. We pick here, and I've been more so the older I get. But I needed a plan. I needed a schedule. I needed to know how it was going. And I was rigid, because that was me. I like checking stuff off. I needed things to go. And this is really funny because I found a whole bunch of old journals, and I was looking through one, and right in the beginning of one of these journals, if you zoom in on that, is a plan for when my kids were, Molly's turning 17 on Sunday, and this has Molly in it. So she's probably 5. I'm guessing she was 5 in this schedule. So this is from 12 years ago, and it is like, boom, 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 we're doing this at this time. We're doing half an hour later, we're doing this, we're doing this. And each kid gets a half an hour with me. And when they're not with me, they're either doing their by themselves work or they're playing with a baby. So I had everybody scheduled out and everything planned out. But that's what I needed. And honestly, it's what my oldest needed. My oldest, he would wake up in the morning. What are we eating today, Mom? Where are we going today, Mom? What are we doing today, Mom? And like if I didn't have a plan, it would frazzle me because I had to come up with an answer for him because he wanted to know. And that's just like me. He wanted to know what was coming up. He wanted to know what he could look forward to. So for his sake and my sake, we had to do a whole lot of planning early on, meal planning, just all the planning, play dates and all the things. So I had to be ready. That was like the social play date part was part of it too. I couldn't just do academics. I had to have social things to do. I'm social, he's social. We are not homebodies. So that was part of our whole package. And part of that was utilizing the local church for kids' playtime or whatever. So mom could get a few hours of sanity, and they went there for like a preschool kind of a thing, right? And they learned stuff and played or whatever, but it gave me a little bit of time. So, again, like Gretchen said, as I've gotten older, I'm asking my kids more questions. What do you want to do? Or watching them. What do they like doing? What do they spend their free time on? How do they like to learn? I have a girl who she wants to be an auto mechanic or a welder or something like that, which is just like, wow, like, do you realize, what that field is like? And she's just like, I want to do it. Like she's been soldering and all this kind of stuff. And so you have to go with that, because that's how God designed them to be. So it's learning a flexibility that I didn't have early on. So that it took 15 years to get to that place. It wasn't an instantaneous thing. And I think, God takes us through those seasons when we need to be in those seasons. Like when our kids are particular ages and they need particular things, and the personalities of each of the kids are different. Of course, you got 6 different people that you're trying to teach. All different. So, and God is really taking me on a journey with some of my younger kids because they learn differently, and that challenges me to stretch myself and how I teach. But I wasn't ready for that when I was starting at 30 years old or 32 or however old I was when I started. So now that I'm older, I'm willing to just be like, okay, let's give it to God and let him tell me where we're going.
So I see myself in both of you. Like what Ginger, when you talked about like checking things off, that's me. I wanted the curriculum that said, do this, do that, and then you're good. And I'm like, good, check, check, check. But I could see how we could easily stress out my 2 boys who are 7 and 9. I have a 9-month-old, but just a 2 school age. And I really had to think about how they learn. Because for me, like once I get something, I'm like, all right, let's move on. Then I realized I had one son who needed mastery. Teach me this, don't ask me again, where the other one needed to be reminded so that he didn't forget it. So he needed a spiral approach. And I'm like, how do public school kids teach 27 kids when I can't even do 2 in the same classroom, right? So, and I'm kind of like, I needed to figure out how the children learn and what worked for them. So the other part is that like sometimes I have these days where I'm like, check, 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 rock star, you nailed it. And then I'm like, oh, but I forgot to do this, right? Like you have these bipolar days where it's so euphoric, you feel like you checked everything off, and then you forget one small thing. But I think when I reached out to Gretchen and when I thought about this episode, it was really what matters in the end, because there's so many different things that we can do, right? Like when I talk to Gretchen, she talks about like the 3 R's in terms of read and write and arithmetic, right? And if you think of that, that's brilliant because it's structured. If I say to my kid, write a history sentence or write a history essay on Columbus, that's writing, but it's also history. Whereas when I wasn't thinking about it like that, it was, okay, so we're doing math, reading, writing, spelling, history, Latin, geography, and you go on and on and on and on, and you never feel like you're accomplished. But then forget about academics, there's character. All right, this kid wasn't being kind. Now we need to teach about that. Then you think about life skills and you think about all the things that you could potentially teach. So the flexibility is a blessing and a curse. It's like, I can do anything that I want to do. Okay, which ones do I fit in this limited time that I'm given?
I think the other thing that sometimes happens is we have this misapprehension that if we homeschool, our children won't have any gaps.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not true. If I could get you to lay one thing down, actually, I'm going to get you to lay 2 things down. The first thing I want you to lay down, and the more important thing I want you to lay down, is the B word, which is behind.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Your homeschooling is because you don't want what the public school offers you.
Exactly.
And so behind does not exist because the only thing your kid is behind is you. They're standing behind you because you told them to stand there. Their journey is their own journey. And Ginger, I absolutely can relate to everything you said. God has an infinite sense of humor. And I envision him going, watch this. Because every one of my kids were wildly different.
Yes, yes.
But I thought for the longest time, I was probably 6 or 7 years into the journey before I realized that. I thought they were all the same, just different ages.
Yeah.
And when I finally realized that what one needed was different than what 2 needed or 3 needed, it was a lot, it was liberating a little bit. But we have this misapprehension that we'll check all the boxes, we'll finish all the tasks, we will be, everything will be done, and our kids will have no gaps. Not true. It's not going to happen. And so if you can relax over that, it's so much easier to enjoy your children.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Oh my goodness. I share so much with the behind thing, and they get so wrapped up in the construct of what the public school has created and convinced every single parent in the states exists. Like, you can't teach your kid. You need a professional, and there's grades, and at this age they should do this and they should do that and they should do this, and be like everybody else. And that it's such a hindrance. And that's one of the things I'm speaking on at the conference, is just get rid of the concept of this and that, and be you as their parent and their teacher, and that the kids be the kids as who God created them to be. And if they excel in one thing, let them work on that more, and encourage them in the things that they're weak in, but so don't let fall off. But it doesn't have to be like, again, you don't have to be rock stars at it too, because like with the gap thing, if you're at a job and you need to learn something, someone's either going to train you in it, or you're going to Google it, right? Google it, YouTube it. You're going to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
I know a guy who owned a car lot, and he's like, well, I'm not making enough selling cars, so I'm going to become a mechanic. Guess how he learned to be a mechanic? He YouTubed everything, and he's a proficient mechanic and does a great job, and has a huge, that's how he supports his family now, mostly. I mean, he sells cars a little bit, but it's mostly taking care of cars. So honestly, if you learn to learn, teach your kids how to learn, it's endless. The possibilities are endless at that point. And in the learning, the character building, it all comes together. So it's not like you're focusing on character and we're going to put the academics aside. It all comes together in the same package, because sometimes they just don't feel like doing the math lesson, but you talk about good character. Or last week, someone was supposed to come over and play, and he got sick. And the child who was waiting for the friend to come over just totally fell apart. And was because the heart was set on it, right? And this happened to my boys when they were little too. So we had a whole discussion about, I know it really breaks your heart. It's okay to be disappointed, and let's cry a little, but let's pray for your friend who's sick. So instead of focusing on the loss, we're focusing on how we can pray for others and help others. And that was as important as let's read the reader that we were reading, So there's just so much more to educating at home than just getting the things done and checking them off the list. It's just life and growing relationships together.
Well, and I think sometimes this is the longest journey you'll ever take where you don't see the results of the journey.
Yeah.
And so as moms, we want the best for our children. We want, we have dreams and aspirations, and I want to see my child do this. But where I often find conflict with moms is what your child wants is not what you want.
Yeah.
And to be able to hold those dreams and those aspirations loosely, so that when your child says, I want to be an auto mechanic, or like my youngest son, he was a tremendous student, and he was recruited by half a dozen D1 schools to swim at the college level. And at about April of his senior year, he said, I don't want to swim in college. He burst into tears telling me this. And I said, I know. And he said, what? Why didn't you tell me? And I said, because if I had told you that I knew you didn't want to swim, you'd have doubled down on the fact to prove me wrong. So I was waiting for you to come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
He's an apprentice electrician, and he is wildly happy. And I check in with him about once a month, and I'm like, so how are we doing? Was this a good decision? And he said, absolutely, Mom, I'm having the best time. But what I had to be willing to do for myself was mourn the fact that this was my last child and I couldn't wait to go college visit and I couldn't wait to have that experience with him. And then I didn't have that experience.
Mhm.
So being able to hold those aspirations loosely is enormous. And it's the moms who are just like, but they have to do this.
Yeah.
It's hard. That's hard.
Yes.
Hold them loosely because that's what God
Yeah.
would tell us. He orders our steps. We don't.
Yeah.
Psalm 37:24 says he orders the steps of a man. Well, he orders the steps of a woman and the steps of our children as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There is so much freedom and wisdom in this conversation because one of the things I wanted to do with my curriculum was to make sure that it was God-centered. So instead of teaching the Bible and then saying, okay, we're done with that part, now let's go learn the electives and the other things, what I tried to do was to put God in the center. So in every single thing, we were talking about God. So whether it was history, we're talking about God, whether it's science, we're talking about what he created and geography, put it all together. But what I didn't do was what you just shared, Ginger, in terms of doing life together, right? So as your child is having the meltdown because of the sick friend, that's an opportunity for character building. That's an opportunity for a life lesson, right? But it's not, okay, today I'm going to teach my kid how to respond to disappointments, right? You're not doing it that way. As it comes, as you're doing life together, that's when you're instilling those values. So what I really hear is that what I'm doing is siloing everything. We're going to do math. We're going to do this versus we're baking. We're doing math. We're counting, right? So I really appreciate that you said that. But then when Gretchen, when you talked about holding things loosely, it is so true because I know I've had conversations with people who want to homeschool and they're like, but the sports thing, my husband is a basketball player and he wants the kid to play basketball. What if the kid has no interest? My family comes from a football family. We need to make sure that they're able to do this. But when you say hold it loosely, it just really reminded me that it's not about us. Like these children are on assignment to us, and God has loaned them to us for his own purpose, for his own glory. Like they're wired a certain way. They have these desired for a certain reason. But it's so interesting the way you put it when you're like, hold those dreams and aspirations loosely. Yes, you want the best for your kid. Yes, you may even want to try to live vicariously through them if it's something that you wanted that you didn't get to, or something that you saw for them, or see in them that they don't see. But we really have to hold it loosely. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, my middle daughter was the child who came home with every tiny thing that she found, Mom, here's a bird. Mom, here's a squirrel. Mom, here's a turtle. Mom, here. Until I was like, Shelby, you can't go outside because we don't need any more creatures. She got to college and she said, I want to major in special education. And I said to her, why? Because you love everything to do with animals. Why would you major? Because I love animals. I don't want them to be my career. Okay. Fast forward 10 years later, she's a research biologist for USAMRIID, and she works with animals every day. But the interesting part was she didn't want to hear it from me. I had to wait until God said, yeah, that's really the direction I want you to go in. And I watched her spend 3 years in college majoring in something that I knew she wasn't going to enjoy. And the hardest part was God kept saying, just be quiet.
Wow.
Just wait. And that be quiet and wait is not the character of a homeschool parent.
We want results now.
Oh man.
We want the best for our kids, and nobody wants it more than a homeschool mom standing next to their kids because they're a reflection of us. And so that makes it hard.
Yeah. And part of that, part of what plays into that, like, Rose in New Jersey, you're down in Virginia, Carolina. Where are you
I'm
at?
in Western Carolina.
Okay. So I'm not sure what the law is like down there, but like in Pennsylvania, everyone's terrified, right? It's actually not as bad as whatever everyone thinks it is, but there's this terror of, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. I gotta, make sure, whatever. And that plays into the pressure of, you gotta do this, you gotta do this, you gotta do this, which, we need to release. We need to release that. Beloved, release. God gave me that. Beloved, you are beloved to me. release it. You know, and you can put whatever word after release you want, but it's pretty much just release everything.
Well, and Ginger, you're right, because the thing that goes along with that is right about this time of year, parents start doing achievement tests.
Uh,
And maybe their children don't score as well on as well on the achievement test as they wanted them. And we take that very personally. I
mhm.
gotta ask you guys, and this is going to sound a little facetious, but there's a big gradient of truth here. Did anybody ever ask you what you got on a third grade achievement test? Nope.
Believe.
Nope.
You just set so many people free.
Yeah.
Because the truth of the matter is,
Yeah.
it matters in the moment. But here's the other thing. It is one morning or one day in your child's academic career. What if they were off that day?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's not a reflection of what you have poured into them. And if we can balance that and recognize that he is far greater than anything we could do for them, and
Mhm.
just to recognize that it's all temporal, it's all
Yeah.
temporary, and the third grade achievement test won't be remembered 3 years from now.
And it's
And-
not on your resume.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
I didn't have to put it on my resume. Actually, my resume should have said talks too much, but that's what every report card I ever had said.
Well, and that's one of the things I share with folks in PA about testing. Honestly, you know what the results of the test are going to be before they even take it. If you're working with your child day to day, you know. Like when my oldest took his first test, and I was like, "Oh my word!" I was like, "Oh, can't say I'm surprised," you know. So you know what you might want to bolster or whatever. It's not like it's a shock to you. So, but again,
But Ginger, there are parents who believe, and I meet more and more of them, so I'm not casting aspersions here. There are parents who believe that their 6, 7, 8-year-olds can educate themselves. That's not really true. So then those are the parents who get the results from the achievement test and go, what happened here?
yeah, okay.
How engaged were
Okay.
you in that process?
Yeah. Yeah. See, when that's the difference. So like I was coming from the standpoint of you're with them all the time, you're helping them, you're beside them, you're walking them through. So it shouldn't be a surprise. But if you're in an online school or whatever it is that you're doing, some kind of online program, then yeah, I can see that a parent would not be connected with what the child is doing. And I think with something like that, you have to make it your purpose to get in there. Like home education is I mean, part of the whole thing, like I said earlier, it's relationship. You're building that relationship. And something you were mentioning earlier, I wanted to bring up, I think Ro was talking, it was about, I wanted to mention interruptions. We got our plan and we're doing the thing and we're sitting at the kitchen table with one kid and this other kid comes in here and you're like, interruptions do as much for you in your training for Jesus as they do for anybody else, right? So learning how to handle interruptions and working, whether it's an interruption from another child while you're working with someone else, or if it's a phone call, put this thing away, put it on mute, throw it in the trash. I don't know, but you have to set it aside so you can focus on your kids. You cannot have this beside you while you are doing school. It just
I am really grateful that I
work.
homeschooled before the advent of these things, because I am attention deficit enough that if this thing goes,
Oh no,
I'm there.
Yeah.
I want to know what.
Yeah.
I'm nosy. I want to know.
Yes.
Inquiring minds want to know.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'm so guilty of that. If it's over on my I have a little desk area, if it's over there and I hear it ping, I mute it. Because if I hear it, even if I'm with the kid, my brain is going, ooh, who was that? What is that about? Is it something urgent? Do I need to check on it? You know, is it not, you know, you just got to put it away and give your full focus to your kids. I have these little sticky notes. This is a thing from, I brought all these little props today, bro. I'm a props person. This is from my one schedule. You can see how old it is that I have for my kids, a schedule thing. The top is Proverbs 16:21. Pleasant words promote instruction. Yeah. I kept that on there for years and years. So that's there forever and ever. And then I have another one. It says a leisurely pace accomplishes more than hurried striving. And when you rush, you forget who you are and whose you are. So those two kind of go together, right? So if you're rushed, you're not going to use the pleasant words. If you feel the stress of the schedule, you're going to be like, oh, I gotta get this done. I'm so guilty. I'm not speaking from a place of being the person who has it all together and doesn't do this. I'm so guilty of, come on, guys, what time is it? I gotta leave at this time. We gotta get this all in. Let's go. And I realized a number of years ago that tension in me just, it's like a wall that goes out to the
Absolutely.
kid that totally smacks them in the forehead, right, and bowls them over. So, and I just do that. That's just me. Like, I'm like that times 10. Like, everything that's emotion for me just comes out. That's why I don't take my kids to their driver's tests. Right? That's my husband's job. So just me being under that gun of the schedule and got to get here and make sure I get this done did not create good vibes
Yeah.
in my house. And I needed to, that's another thing to release. I needed to release that. And if we don't get it done today, it's okay.
Yeah.
Well, I had to laugh because one of my coworkers knew we were getting ready for this conversation today, and she sent me this definition from homeschool learners, homegrown learners, which I think is hilarious. But here's a word for you all: homeschoolling. And it says, when you and the kids are discussing the physics of water pressure and looking up science videos to settle an argument, and an hour later you're watching baby owls grow up on a game cam while you finalize a list of ingredients for Egyptian falafel. That, ladies, is the definition of homeschooling.
There you go.
It
That's
really
awesome.
is true. And it made me laugh out loud. But how many times have you had a plan?
Yeah.
The day has gone wildly sideways. And my kids will carve on my tombstone, flexibility is a sign of intelligence.
Oh yeah.
And
I
boy,
remember
I'm
that
telling
one.
you, there were days when we were Mensa candidates, but you know, the education still continues. Even though it didn't follow what you
Yeah.
meted out in the morning, this is what we're going to accomplish today. It doesn't mean the day wasn't successful. It just didn't turn out like you planned.
And that's one of the things I had to unlearn. I thought subconsciously that if you can't measure it, education or learning didn't take place. If I can't give you a test about it, it didn't take place. If it's not on my list and then I can't assess it 2 days later, nothing happened. And that's not true. Because as I'm listening to both of you, I'm such an extremist. There are times like I just got back from Jamaica, so I'm super chill and I'm super, like life is cyclical. If we don't do it today, we'll do it tomorrow. And every other time I'm like, Ginger, like, let's go, 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 go. We have to finish this, right? But as I'm thinking about it, it's really the whole idea that well, let me go back to something. Gretchen, you were talking about like the third grade, how, you don't remember anything. Years ago, I went to Germany for a wedding and it was a close friend and I wanted to be able to help, but I was 5 months pregnant and I also had a 2-year-old. So my mom agreed to keep the baby so that I could go and like be hands-on, right? Versus like trying to juggle a kid and not really be able to do anything. I was talking to a woman and I said, I just feel so guilty leaving him. And I don't know, like how this is going to affect him. And she said to me, Bro, what do you remember about being two? I'm like, nothing really. She's like, he's not going to remember. And then my mom is sending me all these pictures of him in the sand and he played and he's having such a great time. And here I am crying as I drop him off with the person who raised me. I think she can take care of, like, I'm confident in her ability, but here I am thinking about the scar and the harm that's going to be done to this 2-year-old because I left him for 2-3 days to go to Germany. The reason I brought that up is because if I can release that part, it's the same thing with the third grade exam. In the moment, I'm not thinking about it. I'm not thinking, this is a moment in time. We'll get past this. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he didn't pass his test. What's going to happen? We really need to let it go and think about the future. What is the character of this child that we're developing? And I'm actually guilty when you talk about like some of the people who are not always hands-on because I'm like, you know how to read. So you know how to read. You're supposed to be able to read to learn. But at what age though? Am I really giving the 9-year-old a math book and saying, here, read the instructions and figure it out? That's like me giving him words to spell or words to learn. And he sees the word, let's say ham, but because I never pronounce it for him, he's saying ham, right? If he's figuring out something on his own, he's not going to know when he's not doing it the right way if I haven't participated in it. So I think sometimes I may be too hands off, like I'm the assessor and I'm the proctor, versus like jumping in there and saying, I'm the teacher, I'm the coach. So like when you ladies were talking, it just made me think of so many things that I was doing that I need to unlearn. And then it made me think about like some of the unrealistic expectations that we have as homeschool moms. So it's just so interesting what you ladies are sharing. We're so thankful to be in this conversation. And again, I can just think about how many people are sitting listening, like, oh, it's not just me. Okay. Oh, it gets better. Okay. So keep sharing.
Oh, well, I have to tell you, I have loved my kids at every single age, but my teenagers were the best.
Mhm. Not there
Watching
yet.
them begin to grow and change and decide what they believed about the world and what they believed about their faith and what they believed about the goodness of humanity was fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
my youngest had asked me Friday night, he said, can my friends come spend the night Friday night? So here's chosen well for his friends, because the next morning he's still in bed, but his friends all had places to go. And one at a time, they would wander up from the den and they would sit down and have a 10-minute conversation with me. One of them was going to his sister's baby shower. Another one was going to work. Another one was going home to help his mom clean the house. Those boys were raised well, and my
Mm.
son chose well in making those boys his friends. And that is as much about homeschooling as it is making sure you can multiply and divide and you
Yeah.
understand fractions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and being thankful, I just think it's so huge. There's so many times when I don't know what the end is going to be on the issue or whatever is going on. And I just started praying at the beginning of the issue, or the thing that I was like concerned about. God, I don't know what's going to happen here, but I thank you for what you're going to do. Because I know you're going to do
Mm.
something. You know, you're continuing this good work in me. You're continuing good work in my children. You're going to do something. It's going to turn out good. I trust you in it. Just, like strengthen me through it. Because sometimes we feel so weak. And that was one of the things I just heard recently about. We always think about working from our strengths. What are our strengths? And let's do things from our strengths. And this person said about when you work through your weakness, then it's definitely all God.
Mm.
You can't claim any of it. It's not like you want to steal his glory and say, well, it's all God when it's from your weakness, when it's not from so if you don't feel equipped as a homeschool parent, that's all God's glory, quite
Yeah.
obviously. And you can proclaim that, and you can thank God for his goodness to you, because, when you choose to keep your kids home and you're training them and allowing God to guide you, and you might make some choices that weren't the best, but God's going to use it. He's going to work
Yeah.
it. What's Romans 8:28 say, right? He's going to work
All
it all
good things.
out. You were off track for a while, but it's okay. Um,
And you know what?
when we're
That's really true, Ginger, though. You're
yeah,
going to make some choices and you're going to go, oh, I wish I hadn't.
ah, yeah,
Sit with that for a hot minute
Yeah.
and then walk away from it.
yeah,
Mm.
Because you don't, just like you're saying, Ginger, you don't know. You have to trust God for how it's going to work out. And maybe picking that stinker piece of curriculum and working through it for a year and going, gee, I wish I hadn't done that, leads you along a path that God had fully intended you to do. And you didn't know it.
Right. Yeah. And what I'm hearing too is that while we also redeem our education by teaching our kids, it's more about our own personal and spiritual development. So not only are we being stretched because he's personally equipping us to teach our children, but it's also, like Ginger said, the weaknesses, while that's illuminated, it's also what we're working through. Because for me, I realized that for patience, I would say, all right, God, I want to be more patient. Download it, and he's like, that's not how it works. I'm like, Holy Spirit, activate. It's like, no, I'm going to give you a situation and then you're going to walk it out. And I'm like, okay, fine. Then I just won't pray those kind of prayers anymore. Because, you just want something to happen so fast. But then what I realized with homeschooling is all those character issues that I need to work through, it's showing up. So even if it's consistency, like you said, Gretchen, sometimes it's the shiny object syndrome. Oh, new curriculum, you're switching every 2 seconds. Whereas it's just, hey, slow down, try this, be consistent, right? Or it could be
Right.
patience. You're getting upset because you said, I told you 20 times that 2 + 2 is 4. slow down, patience, right? So we're redeeming our education from the academic side, and we're, going through things and teaching them in ways that are fun and all of that. But it's also how we're developing spiritually and personally. I think it's a paradox of homeschooling and also the paradox of motherhood. The same thing that's the beauty is the same thing that's the challenge.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
I
Well, and
spend
that's
every
your
morning waking up and saying, thank you, Lord, for this day. Let it be yours. And then my feet hit the floor. And I tell him exactly how I want him to run the whole Megillah. And to me, he's standing there going,
There she goes again. That's me.
if I've learned anything now my eldest daughter will be 38 in May. My youngest is 18. We kept forgetting what it was like to have somebody in diapers. So we kept starting over again. And what they have taught me is that God within them is far greater than anything I can do for them. And so my goal should be to raise them to be exactly who he wants them to be, not who I want them to be,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
who he wants them to be.
Mhm.
And that's not even all about academics or achievement or even their spiritual lives they are God's calling on them. They're not, I'm going to make this happen. And that is kind of wild. But, one of the things that I said at CHAP last year, in fact, I said it all year, is this book that we all believe. My Bible's back here on the bookshelf. Our kids are going to make choices that don't always line up with that book. And our role should be to love them anyway, because God loves us when we make choices that don't line up.
Mhm. Yeah, and you know what, Gretchen, as we encounter life and we don't make the right choices when they're home, and you go to your children and you apologize to them, I made the wrong choice. I did the wrong thing here. I handled this very poorly. Can you forgive me for the way I treated you and what I did? That does huge things. That does huge things. I've talked to my adult children about some of the ways I handled things when they were younger. And you know what? They are so full of grace. The oldest said, you know what, Mom, you did what you needed to do when I was that age. I needed that. And that's such a blessing to me. You kind of teary as you think about it because, they stand up and call you blessed, what? It's so awesome to see them making those choices. And, you work through some of the things, like Gretchen said, you have these plans and you think these things and you just need to let them go. And sometimes you have those plans for so long that your children have those plans and they think they need to do them too. For example, my husband works at a college. They get education for free. It was not for my oldest. It was not. It was not. And I knew it before he did. I said, you know what? I don't think you should go. I know it's free and there's the value. And, Steve's been working there for so long. And but so you guys can have this, but it was not. And now he is exactly where he needs to be. And I told him the other week, the meaning of his name. I said, you are doing the meaning of your name. What your name means, you are living it. His name is Joel, Silas. So God, Yahweh is God, and Silas means from the forest. He's a camp director, a Christian camp director. He's proclaiming God from the forest. You're fulfilling your name. And when that hit me, I was like, oh, Jesus, that is so cool. But it was not a path or something that we were thinking when they were younger or whatever. And we had to release it. Steve and I had to release it. Joel had to release it. They had to, and he had to do it on his own terms and his own time. But then God redeems it and does this other awesome thing where you're like, wow. So yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So let him wow you. Let God, release the stuff so God can wow you.
There's something I think that's important for us to also talk about, and that is there are parents who have pulled their kids from school and begun the homeschooling journey because someone has said their child can't, or their child has a disability, or their child has a learning challenge. And we have a unique opportunity to see the whole child in a way that an academic experience doesn't see the whole child. Ginger, talking about God has an infinite sense of humor and he's going to give you different kids. My fifth child didn't learn to read until he was not more than 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And well-meaning academics told us he's not college material. Send him to trade school. Well, so as an aside, what trade school can you get through without being academic oriented? Somebody help me with that one. I'm asked this question at every conference I attend and nobody can ever answer the question. The truth was he had dyslexia. He had a binocular vision issue that needed resolution before he could even learn to read. He's still a dyslexic. He still has that dyslexic thinking, but he has a degree in computer science and he's a network engineer. And if we had listened to those academics, I don't know where he would be today. We just chose to say, thank you very much. And we're going to be over here fixing that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of parents in your audience who need to hear that because they have heard the diagnosis and now they believe that that's the be all and end all.
Mm-hmm.
And I have, I do 15, 16 homeschool conferences a year. So I have conversations with parents all the time and they'll say, this is little Johnny and he's dyslexic. That's the first way you want to identify Johnny?
Right.
What does Johnny like to do? Well, Johnny likes to climb trees and he's never seen a Lego set he can't put together. And he loves everything to do with space. Oh yeah, and he has dyslexia.
Right.
That's what I want to teach moms, how to identify their children.
Versus the labeling. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because if I had embraced that with Duncan, I don't know where Duncan would be. We just kept the cup half full for him. And he did all right. In fact, if you want something really interesting, Duncan did 2 episodes with me for the Demi Learning Show podcast. He took 6 months off work and hiked the Continental Divide Trail last summer. And so the first episode is about the experience, but the second episode is about the spiritual journey of the experience.
Wow.
And it was really pretty fascinating. There was a lot of things I learned about my kid I didn't know, and it was pretty amazing. And I think all of us, if we can say, wow, there are things about our children we don't know. Lord, reveal them to me. That's really powerful stuff.
I was going to ask you for tips, like practical tips, but you two weaved it perfectly in the conversation. Like there's so many things that we can walk away with. Anything from, holding our dreams and aspirations loosely, from trusting God, from gratitude to how homeschooling and home-centered education stretches us and is for our own character development. There's so much that you shared. I would ask if you had any final thoughts, or if you wanted to recap what you shared, because this has just been so truly amazing.
Go, Ginger.
You want to start, Ginger?
Well, let me think. Final thoughts. It's really just about letting God guide you through, letting God change you, letting God grow you. The education will happen when it needs to happen. He wants you to grow with your children. He wants you to grow in your relationship with him. I had mentioned with Ro before, if you're doing things and you don't have space for time with Jesus alone, time to grow with your spouse and time to be with your children, there's too much going on. So, that relational time and just letting God steer and being grateful for wherever it is that goes. It might be hard to be grateful, but yeah, flexibility. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think those are very wise words. I love it, Ginger. I have to say, if I could have parents walk away with one thing, it's love your children. Just love them where they are, love them when they achieve, love them when they don't achieve, and trust that God is greater. God's love for them is greater than any love that you could possibly have for them.
Amen.
and enjoy the journey. Cause you know, we spend so much time. I'm the person who puts stuff on a list so I can check it off. Oh, we did this. Well, it's not on the list. Well, excuse me, let me write
We
that
write
down.
it.
I can check it off. I would be that person.
Check.
So enjoy your children
Yeah.
because I cannot believe how fast the time has passed.
Yeah. Listen, if you enjoyed this conversation, imagine what it would be like attending in person with these women. Ginger and Gretchen, please tell us all about the conference coming up in February. What are the dates, Ginger?
Okay, so February 22nd and 23rd. It's going to be in Lancaster at the, I always get this,
Farm
I had
and
to think about
House.
the Farm and Home Center. Oh, I ask Steve every time, Steve, what is that place called? Like, I don't even know. So yeah, we're going to be there for 2 days. 9 speakers, I think it was that
Yes.
with the last count. And yeah, it's really just like the subtitle could be called Refresh and Renew, right? So we're just getting together. It's a time of refreshment. It's really, there'll be a few vendors, but it's really not about that. It's about connection, getting, whew, I can do this, you know, it's winter and spring's not here yet, right? I can keep going, that kind of thing. Just to be encouraged. So I'm going to be encouraging people in regards to the Pennsylvania law, explaining that so they're not terrified of it. And also, like I said before, discussing some of those constructs that we're very used to in the public school and how they don't exist in homeschooling, how to be free from those types of things. Yep.
I'm really looking forward to coming up from North Carolina to spend some
Yay.
time and just have conversations. And where I find virtue is to be able to meet a mom where she is and then encourage her to stay in the journey.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that I'm doing will be about encouraging you to stay in the journey.
Awesome. Thank you so, so much. This has been a tremendous blessing for me. I actually plan to rewatch this and take copious notes because there's so much wisdom and just grace in it. And I thank you so, so much for your time. Thank you for encouraging us as we're coming along. Thank you for your transparency, sharing what went well, what didn't go so well, just giving us the full vision and helping us to, one, simplify, but also focus on first things first, really prioritize what matters. I appreciate you so, so much. And may God richly bless you. And thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Thanks for
today.
having us, Ro.
It was awesome.
My
It was
pleasure.
great.
Thank you.